All right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Want to extend a really warm welcome. So glad to see everyone here. Really excited to be here today to share a little bit about Microsoft Purview Data Security Investigations, one of the newest solutions in Purview. And what we thought we'd do is just share a little bit about the why of Purview DSI, the what, and then we'll do a demo and we'll share some key need to knows like consumption model and how to get access. And of course, we're super excited for all the questions that you'll bring to the table. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Edward Wu, who will take us through a demo as we get into the presentation. Ed, want to say hi?
Yeah, great to be here and glad everybody can make it. Look forward to this session.
Awesome. And so we're just getting started with DSI. We're in public preview now, launched right at the end of April. And so we're in a couple of months into public preview. We've got some exciting momentum, some learnings coming from early customers. And so we're excited to dive in. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, starting to talk a little bit about the why of Purview Data Security Investigations. In Purview Data Security, we've got a great portfolio of solutions helping out with data security, data compliance. But we did hear from customers about the evolving landscape and the situation that they're faced with over the last few years as they manage their data security. And we'd also noticed some, trends and some factors leading to us thinking about this as a real significant opportunity to deliver customer value for our customers who are facing these types of challenges. And so some of the things that we noticed out there and heard from our customers as we were gathering information is, hey, this data breach, the impact of data breaches is growing. And it's not only growing, it's multiplying. And we're seeing a real upward trend in this type of activity, and organizations really grappling with the impact of that on their data, on their customers, on their employees. And so really having a solution to help address this was something that was top of mind from a lot of folks. And then we also heard with that, of course, as you all are aware, there's a shortage in worldwide cybersecurity talent and no shortage of problem to address with that talent. But we know that, hey, getting folks into the right roles, the right positions to address these problems is challenging. And so looking at, how can we shore this up and move more quickly in response to some of these scenarios that are impacting customers and organizations. And then we know also that this takes a long time. It's complicated when you do have a significant data breach. It can take up to 292 days as the statistic that research has brought together, almost a year. This is a long time to really kind of investigate and contain that breach and get through all the remediation activities and deal with the risk that's might have been created with that incident in your organization. But it's not just breaches. We've also heard from customers, hey, there's of course things like exfiltration that are going on. There's oversharing that might be happening. There could be data spillage within the organization. And any of these might lead to requirements for the security operations team and the deep dive investigators in that team to need a tool to help to really understand, hey, what data was impacted, what risk is present in that data, whether it's sensitivity or severity or volume of data, and then really start to take action and figure out how to mitigate some of that risk. And so that's what Purview DSI is kind of really all about, helping to address for customers. And so those are some of the inputs, some of the kind of the market input that really helped shape how we wanted to tackle this particular solution. And so now, really excited to share Purview DSI is available. You can head over to purview.microsoft.com today, get yourself enrolled, get your organization set up. We'd love to see you start to get use out of the solution. And this is where you're going to be able to identify incident relevant data, efficiently and quickly. And there's some really cool things here about how we help organizations do this, not only using, hey, understanding the folks who may have been involved, the time range who may have been involved, what was the project name or the locations, but also integrations from other Purview solutions to launch right into DSI. And then once you've got a handle on the data, use AI-powered deep content analysis to find key risks and understand the sensitivity and the severity. And this is where we're seeing some really powerful and cool responses from customers around bringing out that, what is the severity, what's the sensitivity of this data, and helping me sift through just piles and piles of data. And the mental models, think of, you've got a container ship just full of boxes with no labels. You don't have any idea what might be in there. DSI is going to help you swift through that and put priority labels on things and help to think through, hey, what might you want to address first as the investigator who's focused on reducing risk for your organization. And then the third piece is, once you do have a handle on what's risky or what may have happened, and you've put together a sense of how to attack the mitigation plan for this, you can bring things into a mitigation plan and start to close those risks. And identify specific items that need to be addressed, bring in secure collaboration within your organization to take care of those. And so really bringing together this end-to-end solution that complements the other Purview solutions for this specific scenario. Now, if we look a little bit more closely and think about how this fits within the overall portfolio of data security that Purview is bringing to the table, of course, you're familiar with data loss prevention. We just heard about the great recent AMA that took place on this topic, and then information protection, where you could manage your sensitivity labels and understand kind of where the sensitive data, how the sensitive data is in your organization. And then, of course, insider risk management, where you understand kind of user behavior and if there's risk around particular folks inside your organization, which we know is a huge risk and a huge focus area for a lot of companies. Now with data security investigations, this is kind of the fourth leg of the stool to help deliver an integrated approach within Purview. And this just really brings together a cool component to help customers manage each of these pieces together in a coordinated fashion. And one of the really cool things that we've already learned from customers is, hey, I want to use these together and also take the outcomes of the learnings from some of them to improve other places. And so, hey, if I realize that I'm oversharing a lot of sensitive data in email, once I go through my data security investigation, maybe that's a place where I want to go improve or increase my data loss prevention policies to reduce that risk going forward, so that next time I have a data impacting incident, I have less of that data available in those less secure locations of my organization. Okay, so if we look a little bit closer into DSI and each of the phases, we'll go into the demo and share more about this, but we wanted to set the context on how this is showing up and what you should expect as you get into the experience. And so, of course, we'll let you search your organization's Microsoft 365 data estate across documents, emails, Copilot prompts and responses, Teams messages, all that good stuff. And we're starting with that Microsoft 365 data. And we've already heard some great feedback about other data sources that are important for organizations that we're starting to consider. But you can also, as I mentioned, launch a pre-scoped investigation right from Defender XDR, where, of course, a lot of your SecOps administrators are working day to day, seeing incidents, seeing alerts come through, and thinking, hey, how do I get into understanding more about the content that's related to this incident? Similarly, right from insider risk management. I've heard some great scenarios about how you're looking at, hey, what's taking place, and you see that an employee has shared a bunch of emails and files to their personal email. Are those their personal vacation photos, or are those sensitive documents? And rather than going one by one and trying to understand that content, hey, run a quick content analysis with DSI to understand that and get a sense of risk to inform your next steps. And so that pre-scoped investigation launching, bringing you into DSI, understanding the data impact landscape of that particular incident, helps you get a quick start into the solution and get towards that investigation capability where you're starting to understand that risk. Now, once you're in DSI, you've got the data set there that you're interested in. There's some really cool ways you can harness AI and the power of GPT to do analysis on that data. And this is where, when you think about thousands and thousands of files, manually reviewing those is just going to be very difficult. Not only time consuming, but also difficult. So this is actually a really cool way to apply generative AI to do more with less and help customers go quicker through these piles of data when the time is of the essence and you're trying to operate with urgency and speed in a constrained environment. This AI can give a really great boost here. And so a couple of the things that DSI offers today, you can try out, categorize impacted data. Now you can use default set of categories that believe are meaningful across industries. You can do AI suggested categories based on the data set and the nature of the investigation. And you can also do custom categories. So if you have a particular dimension that you're interested, a patent that you're interested, particular trials, set up a custom category around that to identify, hey, which data fits into that category. And we'll also give you a sense of risk associated to that category, so you have a good idea of what might be happening with that data set. Now, the second piece is you can do an examination around, once you've identified, hey, I've got this set of data that I believe has sensitive data, has severe data, has risk in it. I can do a custom examination to pull through kind of all the different components of the analysis of that data. This is what you're actually looking at when you can see this table here. And per item that I've done analysis, you can see that there's a risk score, risk summary, mitigation steps, and gives me a thought process. All because we know that explainability, understandability of the AI is super important. And then finally, there's a vector search component where I can start to do, analysis by context and meaning rather than a specific keyword search. Excellent. So this vector search can be really powerful to narrow down. We'll look at some scenarios that will help to illuminate this, where you can start to say, hey, I'm interested in things related to revenue and things related to talent management, not necessarily things that have those keywords, but generally around that category, and start to hone into that specific information. So some really cool things here we'll look at more closely when we get into the demo. And then as we think about mitigation, it's one thing to know this data set has sensitive information, this data has things that I'm going to want to mitigate. It's another thing to know the activity around those items, like what may have been taking place. And this is where we can bring in the activity graph to support correlations between impacted data and their activities. And this helps me understand, hey, what more might I need to know about particular data sets within there? And how should I think about the mitigation plan in terms of prioritizing? Well, if there's a set of credentials there and it's been used recently, then I'm going to really prioritize that up and bring that to the foreground of what I need to do next. And some really cool aspects around bringing in collaboration with other folks in your team, with specific roles to support that. And then, of course, as we go forward, I mentioned around using some of the learnings to refine the best practices and security practices in the rest of the organization. So it's a little bit more detail on kind of how the solution is shaping up. I did want to spend a little bit of time talking about personas, who's using this. And this is something that, we're gathering feedback ongoing, and we'd love to hear from you as we go through this discussion and learn more. But really, it's the data security admins and teams are the core folks who are gravitating towards using DSI as a way to do this deep dive investigation. And we've heard, there's some anecdotes here around internal investigations coming from IRM and the users spanning IRM, maybe part of XDR as well as DSI. And that's where the SOC analyst comes in. SOC teams, we've seen a fair amount of variety, and you guys can help us figure out if that's consistent. But where you do have multiple levels in the SOC team, and once things are showing growth, lateral movement, persistence, then a deep dive or tier 3 investigator may get involved, and that's the person who's going to want to be using DSI to get started, get an arm around the incident and the data included in that investigation. And then data compliance teams, we're finding as we went through, typically not the right stakeholders for this type of solution, but we are seeing some crossover, and it depends on how organizations are structured and how they're tackling it. But did want to share a little bit about who that persona that we think is landing most squarely with DSI as we get into the demo. Excellent. So I'll keep an eye on the chat and start to triage some of the questions, and I'm going to hand it over to Ed to take us through the demo, and then we'll come back and just go into the questions directly.
Hey, thanks a lot, Nick. All right, let's jump over to the demo, and I'm going to take you through two kind of scenarios. The first one is what Nick was alluding to, is where you need to do the investigation using data security investigations. But the start off point is Defender XDR because there's an incident then. So, okay, let's move to the next slide. Can we advance to the next one, please? Okay, so here we are. We're in Defender XDR, and you see that there's an incident that's come in, and it looks like some type of potential suspicious login, potential lateral movement, email exfiltration. You can see there's quite a bit of data also involved in this. And there's a graph here that looks like there's some preliminary information of what might have gone on. But the real issue here is we need to take it to the next level, right? So we need to investigate this. This looks like a pretty high risk attempt here. And so notice at the very top, there's a banner that actually detects, gives you a little bit of a clue that this may have been a security risk or very sensitive information may have been exposed. And it says, hey, create this, investigate this incident. So it's already giving you a prompt there. So when you actually click on that investigate incident and go to the next screen, that will open up a prompt within Defender where you can create the data security investigation. You supply a name, brief description, and you also select the items you want to investigate. In this particular case, you can see that there's quite a bit of data, 128 gigabytes, 53,000 items. These will be a culmination of different things. And I can create the investigation directly here. The beauty here is there's no need to take these documents, these items, and put them and move them from one location to the other, making the problem worse potentially by making a copy of the data. By directly creating the investigation, we'll go directly, this will all get transferred over to DSI directly. Okay, so next screen, we'll see the actual the DSI page now. This is the transferred information. You can see a high-level view of what the data was. Looks like there's some Exchange, SharePoint teams, and there's some other items. Can give you a count and rough size. Also gives you a rough idea of who the people were involved potentially. If there's any type of SITs or sensitive information types, you can see those. You can see some information there that's been categorized already. So this is the preliminary stage. We haven't, we have to yet, now we know the data set and we can do some additional massaging of this data. Let's say I may want to exclude some data. You can also do that at this point. But let's, for this demo, we're just going to say, yep, this looks like the things I need to investigate. And there's a button there that says add to scope. When I add to scope, that then now prepares the data for DSI to do its job. And it's going to do in a very important step. It's going to take this large data set and vectorize it. Essentially prepare it for data analysis for DSI to do its work. And when we do the vectorization process, it's actually now leveraging the powerful AI capabilities. So first of the things that you can do with the AI intelligence of DSI is categorization. So we have a set of default categories that will always be populated, and you can select all of them or a subset of them. Suggested categories is interesting because this is the ones that that AI will actually start suggesting based upon what it starts understanding you're trying to search for. And that can be a combination of what you're searching for within the categories or your search terms. It'll start to get a clue like, hey, it seems like you're investigating some type of credential leak, and it'll offer those type of suggested categories. You also have the option of creating custom categories, which is entirely up to you. So for example, Nick and I work with a lot of Purview customers who had cases in PII data that was leaked. So they actually created a very simple category, custom category called PII data. Others had some specific incidents around vendor payments, suspicious vendor payments, okay? So they created a custom category. And once that happened, DSI would actually start grouping things underneath those custom categories. So, okay, so now I click categorize, and let's go to the next screen. And you'll see in this particular case from this demonstration example, you'll see the categories, the default ones on the left side. And then notice that there's different ones, and these are subtopics. So for example, there's credentials and access, the third one. And we are also seeing on the right side, it's already very clear that there's some things that look like very high exposure type things, high risk things, and we can see by categories. So it makes your job much easier. Now you can imagine if you had to do this manually, right? Going through 53,000, 128 gigabytes of data, trying to figure out, how to organize all that, how to search with it within those things. And remember, these categories are not just simple keyword type searches. This is contextual. So we understand whether the item that you're looking for is credential related, and there may not even be any mention of a password or a credential in the text of an email or a document. But the fact that there's some context there talking about that is clue, and that would be subcategorized underneath those subtopics of each category. Okay, so now, yeah, go ahead and click the next button. So we have had feedback from customers that said, look, this is really hard for us when we have to troll through so much data. And so we can reduce significant amount of effort here. And more importantly, it also helps us to find things that potentially we might have overlooked. We're all humans. It's almost very difficult, right, to go through all this data, potentially missing something. So with the power of AI, we're trying to, let's say, assist the humans in their investigation very quickly to figure out what they need to focus in on. Going from the 50,000 foot level down to the 10,000 foot level. And here we're going down even further to the next level. We've identified 812 megabytes, 240 items that may be very, very important for this particular investigation. So when I click at the examine button, it's going to go in and do a next level of analysis. So what Nick was alluding to was I've done the high level, AI's done the high level filtering and got me down to a lower level. Now I'm going to go to that next level analysis, which is drilling into looking for the needle in the haystack, so to speak, the actual items that may be the root cause of the issue. So here we can see that this is a high severity credential risks that may be the ones that we are most interested in this particular incident. So yeah, next please. And you'll see that now we've got the insights. Nick showed a brief look at it before, but here we're giving you a risk score. So that tells you, like, look, this looks like a very high risk item. In the first example, this email contains logon credentials, right? Looks like an admin credential. It also gives some suggested mitigations steps. And there's a thought process. Why did this conclude that this was, a higher risk item? This one may be very obvious for all of us, right? So, but there's others where our customers did, in the preview state, did do this analysis, and it brought into light some items that weren't very obvious in the initial investigation. And by the way, the way our early preview customers did use DSI is they actually ran their investigations through their normal processes, which is their set of tools and workflows, and then they ran DSI in parallel, and then they compared the results. Obviously, they were looking to see that if anything was a false positive or true positive, did it reach the same conclusion? And they were all commenting that, hey, this looks great. The analysis that we had to do manually took us a long time, right? In one extreme case, it looked like over a year to complete. Obviously, that's a very extreme case, but you get the idea. If you can use a tool like this that can quickly process large amounts of data and get you to an answer in your investigation, or further to an answer, versus what may take weeks, months, potentially longer, that's pretty significant, both in terms of the number of people you have and the overloaded staff that is already working on so many investigations. The thought process is also important because we're not just telling you, hey, this is a high risk thing, because we know it is. It gives you some logic, some analysis, right? So that you can think about it, and it'll give you also some thinking process to say, hey, like, hey, that doesn't quite make sense, or yeah, that's spot on. So you get the full final decision on how to review all the results that DSI produces. Okay, next screen. The activity graph is important here. So this is another view. Obviously, you had the previous view, but this shows you like, hey, who were the individuals, the users, and what were the items? Could be emails, files, other documents that were involved. And in this particular example, we see that, hey, it involves these 56 files, these 2 users, and these 2 suspicious IPs. The IPs could be scenarios such as improbable travel, or non-corporate IPs, or unknown IPs, or in some cases, flat out, known bad actor IPs. So it's now very clear that give you another view of how to do this analysis, and we're just giving you that information. Now, of course, now you kind of understand the root problem. We still have to mitigate this issue. And when, next screen, we'll go to the mitigation. Now you can take the next step, right? So in this particular example, this was a credential leak scenario. So I need to go involve the intra administrator, make sure that they're involved and understand what credentials were leaked, what applications were involved potentially, and so that they can start doing the mitigation. And next screen. So as I do the assignment of the mitigation, I can also start tracking like what's going on. So on this overview summary page of DSI, in the lower bottom middle is the mitigation step. You can see that some steps are completed or not completed. You can just see that tracking as that progresses. So I've just shown you a kind of an end-to-end demo. The investigation originated from Defender, and then that was actually created in DSI, and then the DSI team then could take it on and move and execute on the investigation, find out what were the ultimate causes of this issue, and now they can assign it to the right mitigation plan and the right people, and take it to the next step. We can also do that same flow from insider risk management, IRM, so I can create the DSI investigation from there directly as well. But let's say neither of those products is where you want to start the investigation. You can, of course, just start the investigation directly from DSI. And that's where you can just do it directly from here, and you point it and find the M365 data that you want to include. So I'll give you a good example of this. We had a customer that was investigating some issue that was reported, an internal reporting system, where somebody had posted some inappropriate content on a group team chat. Okay, they didn't know who it was. All they knew was the date time frame that it occurred, and also the group chat name, and also what the content was. That was the only context that they had to do the investigation. So what did they do? They just created the DSI investigation directly with those pieces of information and start to drill in and find out. They eventually found out, who were the people involved and what was involved, and then they went to the next step of their investigation. Okay, next screen. And yeah, this is just the front end of the DSI main page. Yeah, next screen. Okay, so I'm going to pass it back to Nick, and I'll be online to talk a little bit more about some of these scenarios as well. So back to you, Nick.
Thanks, Ed. That's great. Really great to see the walkthrough and kind of how this is coming together. I do want to pause briefly on that last screen. That's kind of the enrollment screen where you can go through the first couple steps to get started. We'll talk a little bit about how that model works. Coming out of Ed's talk about the demo, and it's so cool to hear him sharing some of the feedback from the private preview customers, which was just an awesome way to kind of get real hands-on validation with DSI. Thought it'd be cool to share a little bit about, hey, what are some of the scenarios that came out from that? Of course, we talked about data breach, we talked about exfiltration, but what are the things that really some of our private preview customers came to the table with and shared with us? So, internal threat, investigation. This was doing analysis and categorization on 19,000 items, as well as copilot translation, and to identify, hey, was a security vulnerability, intentional or accidental, and really trying to understand that the intent behind that. Um, you know, Doing a proactive assessment of data security risk, where replicating a data audit. This was something that was able to be done relatively quickly with the examination feature within DSI that had taken some time to complete previously. Kind of what risk is present doing an audit of that. Fraud seems to be coming up regularly as a use case for DSI, investigating fraud. Hey, was there an employee who's approving POs to fake companies, and understanding content using vector search to hone in on content around vendors, payments, and some of the potential fake names of companies that might have been in use. Bribery has been an interesting one that's come up, and got a really interesting scenario showing, hey, it looked like the Super Bowl, what tickets were being used in an inappropriate way, with basically trying to incentivize certain either customers or partners using this. And so using vector search terms around Super Bowl, travel, they were able to identify related content. And then exposure of sensitive docs. So if you do have an oversharing where people are accidentally added to a group chat that has sensitive information, how do you start to understand that and unwind when that was, who did they actually access the information, whose fingerprints were on it, so on and so forth. And then, as Ed was just talking about, this inappropriate content and conduct that might be taking place. And, of course, harassment and the ways that employees are operating is always top of mind for organizations. And as you get reports of that, you do have to investigate it and figure out what might have taken place. So this is just kind of a handful. I think the list could go on and on, but wanted to share a few to kind of get the juices flowing on, hey, how might I turn this DSI into something that's really productive and helpful for my organization? And so going forward, just want to also talk a little bit about, how does this differ from some of our other solutions in Purview, and in particular eDiscovery, which offers some similar capabilities around searching and reviewing. And so DSI is really, we wanted to just kind of address this head on. It's tailored for data security and a SOC analyst. And so it's really purpose built for that scenario and outcome. Whereas eDiscovery is really focused on serving the litigation scenario, which has a whole bunch of requirements and parameters. And then the integration with XDR and, of course, insider risk management really brings it close to that data security requirement set and scenario for the customer. And so that's something that, hey, going from an incident into an investigation is really that important elevation. AI-powered analysis. This is a thing that is unique to DSI at this time. This is, built on Azure OpenAI to analyze data at scale. Activity insights is also a unique component. So there's a bunch of different things, including the pay-as-you-go model, that I want to spend a little more time on. And that's really about kind of this scenario and the requirements of it, where when you do get into one of these situations, you want to be able to act with speed and urgency and kind of use as much of the solution as you need to get to a better state. And so that's why, hey, AI is a great fit. It's also expensive to deliver, and we want to allow customers really to be able to pay for what they need and and manage it in that way. And so that's also unique to DSI. And speaking of, we'll just cover that quickly before we go into the questions. There's 2 meters that you'll get enrolled on when you go through that enrollment process. And one is around the data that you're going to store in DSI for analysis and for your investigation purposes. And that's a per GB per month meter. So as you get it going, if you do delete your investigation, then the data stored in that investigation will no longer hit that storage meter. And then the second one is the AI analysis for DSI. And this is really about, hey, how much are you going to consume to do all that categorization, vector search, examinations within DSI? And so that there's a few factors that influence that. How much data are you doing? What type of analysis are you doing? But that's where you'll use the SCU, the Security Compute Unit, to bring that AI analysis into DSI. And so I think that's the content. I know we shared a lot, because it's a new solution, we wanted to spend some time and go through things in a pretty close way. Let's move into the AMA now, and wanted to reiterate that if we don't get to all the questions in the call, we'll answer them in the tech community afterwards, and we'll start to go through a handful of them and see how far we can get. And you can continue posting questions on demand if you're watching after the fact. So we'll try to catch those as well. Okay, so let's see. I'm just going to go to the roster here. Can you view the content of documents, etc., in DSI? Ed, you want to take this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So the answer is yes. So it depends on the content type, but for any type of M365 or text type data, yes, you can see it. As a matter of fact, when you do the vector search or the categorization, you can actually see the actual items themselves. So as you go in and see the items, there's a view where you can see it in its native format. Let's say it's an Excel or a PowerPoint or a Word doc, you can see that. There's also a tab where you can see the text view of it as well. And then there's metadata as well. So some of our customers, for example, that were looking for PII data or sensitive information types would just do a quick spot check on a few of these. And lo and behold, they found some PII data or a credit card data involved, and they immediately knew that those items were in scope for their continued investigation. So yeah, absolutely, you can do that.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Ed. Yep. So you can review the full content and metadata. You can do, kind of a couple different viewing modes. And so, yep, get right into that. Validate, that the data is what you think it is, and then that's where you can kind of tag it and bag it over into the mitigation plan. Okay, great. So then back to the list. What is the URL to access the data security investigations content? So what I'll recommend for this one is navigate over to purview.microsoft.com and log in if you're not already logged in. And then there's an All Solutions button there. And you just scroll down to the data security section. You'll see data security investigations preview listed there. And so hop on that tile and you'll get into either the enrollment page, or if you're already enrolled for your tenant, you can get started there. And I'll just pile on to this one with, is this available to all customers? Another question. If not, where is it on the M365 roadmap? So we got a kind of a bundle of access and availability questions. So I'll try to knock those out real quick. It is available in worldwide commercial to all customers, and it's in public preview on the roadmap. The roadmap item for GA is coming up, and we're working towards that. For Other clouds will come to that in the coming months. So it's only worldwide commercial at this time. And then Ed, maybe over to you with this one. What is the license model for this functionality? Is it included with E5?
Yeah, so as we were saying, this is a pay-as-you-go model. There's no prerequisite license model like E5 or anything like that. So the, E5 doesn't play a role in the DSI's consumption model. There's only two cost meters for DSI, and one is the storage cost per month, as Nick was showing, is $5 per gigabyte per month. So that's the data that you're pulling into the investigation. And then the next meter is this SCU, or security consumption unit. That's the meter that actually is using the AI capabilities. So those are the only two cost meters. So other than that, once you assign a role, we'll take the question on, you know, what permissions and roles you need. Once someone has a role in DSI and starts doing the investigations, that's the only things that will be costed, that will be accrued to the billing. So there's not a E5 component to this at all. This is very different than, let's say, some other products that you may be familiar with, where there may be something where an E5 license has to be assigned to the actual investigator, DSI users. That's not the case here.
That's great. And maybe we'll just keep it rolling with, can you advise on the different permissions required for different levels of access to and management of data?
Yeah, there's three specific roles for DSI. There's the DSI administrator. They can see all investigations, they can create investigations, they can assign people to different investigations. So that's the all-up administrator role. The second role is the investigator role. So this role is only assigned to specific investigations. So you can imagine the sensitivity of some of these investigations where you only want someone to access their specific assignment to investigation A and investigation B, but they should not see and should not have access to any other investigations that are going on in their organization. So that's the second role. The third role is a reviewer role. They can go into specific investigations that they've been assigned to. They can view everything, but they can't modify anything. So you can imagine, let's say in the mitigation step, where you bring in somebody that needs to see some of the data as part of what they're being asked to take the next step on. Or maybe it's a legal person that wants to go look at some of these things that were the results. So that's the reviewer role. Those are the three DSI roles. Now, earlier in my demo, I showed creating the DSI investigation from Defender. And I also mentioned you can do the same from Insider Risk Management. The creation of the DSI investigation does not need a DSI specific role. You have to have the appropriate role in either a Defender or IRM, but they will be able to create the investigation. But that's their job, to create the investigation, which now gives a clean handoff to the people who are taking it to the next level. But to create the investigation from those tools does not require a DSI role.
That's great. Thanks, Ed. Okay, jumping back into the questions, and we love feedback on that RBAC structure. You know, that's kind of the initial place we wanted to start. We know that, you know, you want to have someone who's looking across, and then some folks that should have access to their own, but not others, unless they're a team member of that investigation. And then the reviewer it kind of came together as a part of strong feedback when customers have said, hey, one of our challenges is we're trying to manage a data security incident, and we get into a position where we're creating a secondary data security incident because we're downloading files onto local machines and handing them here and there, and we'd really love to do this more in the solution. So that's something we're working on. How do we support that with roles like reviewer and sharing specific content that needs to be mitigated? Okay, so then how does a DSI data security investigation differ from an IRM investigation? So I think that's a great question. I can take a pass at it, and you can add in it if you'd like. Really where you want to harness DSI is when you have a lot of content. And so in insider risk investigation, you may kind of have kind of an incident where you're understanding what's taking place around this particular user, what are the activities, what have they been up to, and part of that might be that they've touched a lot of content or they've interacted with, taken action on a lot of content. And if you need to get into a place where you want to understand that content, and it's enough that you don't want to understand it kind of in an ad hoc way, then leverage DSI to run some of that content analysis for you, bring back some insights, and then you can use those insights to update kind of the severity, the next steps for that insider risk investigation and the policy that you have going. And that's where there's some really cool things where if you do determine that this is a valid insider risk, someone's up to no good, then use some of those adaptive protection policies that we talked a little bit earlier around DLP and MIP to improve your resistance to that risk, even as you figure out what to do about that insider and gather more kind of data points and evidence maybe around the situation. So that content analysis can help in that way to help build the picture and, hey, is this a risk? Validate that, and then also inform next steps. Okay, this looks like a good one. Maybe Ed, I'll pass this one over to you. It says, could you provide guidance on the best practices for using Microsoft Purview when dealing with large amounts of unlabeled data?
Yeah, so this is exactly why DSI is powerful, right? So when you're investigating something, in the nature of the investigation is I don't know specifically what's entailed. It could be data types that are unlabeled or not classified or not under any type of SIT. But I need to still investigate, right? So DSI, the powerful capability is I can now pull in that data. I can add to scope what I believe should be in my investigation scope. And that at that point, I don't necessarily care necessarily what's kind of data it is. I just need the data, right? So it's M365 data in particular, SharePoint, Exchange, people, what they've posted in different chats. All of that is pulled in, and it can be further scoped to the individual or groups. And maybe if you do have some specific additional data and part of the investigation, like we know that it's a certain kind of data, then you can still further scope it down. But the idea is that we don't want to force you down to anything where you have to just select a certain kind of type of data. It's fair game to pull that into DSI for the analysis and the investigation.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Ed. Yeah, I think some of this is that unlabeled data is a opportunity area for risk and potential exfiltration or activity that might not be desirable. So DSI is actually a great way to start to do some spot checks, and we've seen some cool use cases where, hey, it's not just about remediating what what known risks you have in the data set, but also saying, oh, now I want to go out and say, hey, how much sensitive content is in Ed's mailbox? And is that the right place for that content? And do I need to have a policy to get him to move some of that or label it or put some protection on it? Okay, then jumping back, so this is a great question. So this one starts out, I can see the models based on resources and size of data. Are there tools to estimate potential cost of searches based on ballpark sizes of data? So this is great. This is something we're working on right now. We have a couple things. So in the docs that we provide the link to, you can see some rough t-shirt sizes and kind of estimated consumption. But we've already heard, hey, we could use some more. So we're working on a little bit more detailed breakdown across 4 different scenario sizes and estimated costs. And there's some assumptions baked in there, but that'll be coming into the documentation soon, within the next couple weeks. And so that should help. We're also working on, hey, how do we provide an estimator? And so what we'd like to do is allow you as the investigator to come in and say, hey, I think I have about 50 GB of data. I think I'm going to want to do about this type of analysis across vector search, categorization, and examination. Give me a range of about how much that might cost me. You know, the other factor to layer in is duration. How long are you going to be managing that data? And so that's how we're hoping to start to address this and give more kind of certainty about hey, how you should plan your budgets and think about the spend you might have in DSI. And so as we work through that estimator and get some feedback and kind of prove it out, then we'll work to bring that into the portal itself so that you can do that in product. That's probably a little ways out, but that's kind of the journey that we're taking to help with that. So just net it out, starting with docs, and then we'll have this estimator coming through, Microsoft representatives and some of the discussions that could be had thereafter. Okay, let's see, that one was similar. Preceded question, can DSI process data from non-M365 sources?
Yeah, that's a great question. So
Yeah.
today, yeah, go ahead, Nick. You want to say something?
No, go ahead. I was going to toss it to you.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, absolutely. It's our intent to support all data sources. Today, it is definitely in the M365 um, focused. We totally get it that all our customers use all kinds of data, all kinds of applications, right? So we want to be start to prioritize the most most popular ones first and kind of go through the list. So we will be able to add those natively. Some of our early customers did find another way to do this. So for example, some customers had some data from another data source where what they did was they exported that and then imported it to SharePoint Online. Then when they ran DSI, they pointed DSI at that specific SharePoint site so that it could ingest the data there. Obviously, there's an interim step there that had to be done. Not the best experience, but it did allow them at least to continue with the investigation. So, but in the future, yes, we will absolutely add additional capabilities to add other data sources.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Ed. And, we'd love to hear what are the top ones that should be added. How should we think about that in terms of this scenario for data security investigations? Hey, which are the ones? We have a bit of a list going already, but that's always an important input. Okay, let's tackle another one. DSI is pay-as-you-go and requires SCU and storage. Can DSI use the security copilot SCUs that an organization already has? You want to take this one, Ed?
Yeah, great question there also. So while the concept of SCU is very similar with Security Copilot and DSI, however, we can't use the same ones. In other words, you can't mix and match. If I bought 1,000 SCUs for Security Copilot, I can't necessarily for DSI say, okay, I'd like to use 10% of that or 20% of it, bring them over to DSI. So that's not something you can do today. The DSI SCUs are separate from the Security Copilot SCUs.
Yeah, and this was actually, just to add to that, this was based on some customer feedback around wanting some predictability and management around the two different, experiences. Of course, the Security Copilot SCUs cover integrations in a bunch of different places, kind of embedded experiences around Copilot summarization, NL to KQL type of things, and is a little bit different in the way that it's consuming the SUs. DSI is going through bulk content and in some cases a lot of content, and so it's pretty bursty, consuming a lot at one time and then letting the investigator do the analysis. So there was a concern, actually, just to show a little bit of the backstage here, is that if you run DSI, would it just use up all the security copilot SCUs, and the folks operating the security copilot and looking for their embedded experiences will be thinking, well, what happened? And it's like, oh, well, Fred ran a DSI and used everything up. So we wanted to at least delineate them so that each of the use cases could make sure that they're managing their capacity well. We're taking feedback on this. We want to learn about this. This is kind of a newer areas we think about applying these SCUs in different ways. So that's something that we'll learn as we go and we'll iterate. We do have a way to share some of the feedback through the tech community. We'd love to hear folks' thoughts on that. But majorly reacting to customer feedback on how they want to manage this to help smooth that for the organizations. Okay. This one we kind of covered already, but how do you estimate how many SCUs are needed for use on each? Is there any t-shirt sizing? And while I did talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing next, Ed, maybe you just want to share a little bit about what we learned going through private preview and how folks
Yeah.
are, using this and what they were seeing as they operated it.
Yeah, so because we had Nick and I were working with private preview customers, we actually could see their consumption. So yeah, there was some storage costs. The range, just give you ballpark figures, the range of the storage went from a few hundred megabytes to close to a terabyte of data in a couple cases. So those storage costs would have been the $5 per gigabyte per month. But as Nick said, once your storage or once the investigation was over, the mitigation plan was in place. They didn't need to keep that data around it at that point. But the SCUs were the interesting one. So just a reminder, there's the four major consumptions of the SCUs themselves. One is the initial vectorization of the data, which prepares it for the AI analysis. That doesn't consume a whole lot, so that's a small amount. But categorization, vector search, and the deeper examinations, those are the ones that consume the most. And of those three, I would say maybe categorization and vector search were the most largest users. But interestingly, once the analysis was, the investigation started and the analysis was done, what we observed is most of our customers didn't just continue searching and categorization. Once they kind of got to the answer they needed, they were done. So the SAUs that they consumed weren't as necessarily as large as you think. However, we had a small sample set. We're still collecting more data on more customers. But if you just continue to run, of course, you're going to consume. But the consumption was, between 20 to 100 type of SCUs. Depending on the searches they did. Now some of our customers used it a little bit more just because we were trying to get them to give us additional feedback on the tool. So in a real investigation, they probably would have been done, but because we wanted more feedback on the tool, they maybe artificially ran more SCUs just so we could get more feedback. So maybe their usage would have actually been higher than a representation of a true investigation. Like I said, we're still collecting the data, and as Nick mentioned, we'll have an estimator so that you can figure out, like, hey, this is the rough size, this is how many how many categorizations or searches I'm going to do, and you'll be able to at least get a better feel for how much consumption would be there.
That's great. Thanks, Ed, and really great to share some of those insights from how it worked for private preview customers. So with that, I think we're at the top of the hour, just about. Really appreciate everyone joining up today. It was so cool to be able to connect directly with folks and hear what's top of mind, hear how things are going. We'd love to see you come into the experience and try it out and give us feedback on, hey, how does it look? How does it feel? Is this, what you're hoping for? What would you like to see next? And keep the conversation going. So for now, so long, and we'll look forward to next time.
Thanks, everyone.